Hi everyone, welcome to our Michelin Grand Prix de France wrap-up show. We'll try not to emulate some of the runaway wheelie bin fires that we can spot in the Le Mans campsite across the track with this podcast, but we can't make any promises. I'm Adam Wheeler, and thankfully I'm located a good 3 rows away from Neil Morrison in the media centre here, so my snacks have been safe throughout this whole Grand Prix. Who was the victim of your looting this weekend, Neil?
The victim of my looting was Severino's, which is the hospitality unit that we use to eat throughout the day. So thankfully I wasn't jumping in on my partners or my colleagues' supplies.
But it is great to have David Emmett on the line, who at 7 p.m. on a Sunday is a good 10 hours away from finishing his roundup for the French Grand Prix in round 5 of the season. Dave, how are you doing?
I am actually a bit tired. It's been I've been going to sleep at 4 a.m. every night, which is not ideal. Last night in particular, sat there watching lots and lots of onboard footage of Pecco Bagnaia, but I think that's a subject we should save for the middle of the week because it's a bit complicated.
What, the fact that you spent hours and hours watching onboard footage, or there's actually something useful that you spotted?
Yes.
Both.
Okay. Listen, guys, for the benefit of our listeners, we don't like to sort of make spoilers, but let's just do a quick summary of the main headlines. We're assuming that people will have known what happened today here at round 5. First of all, of course, Jorge Martin forgets his Jerez pain with a triple here at Le Mans, a new lap record, pole position, sprint, and his 14th GP win, I think. Secondly, Marc Marquez is now up to 3rd in the championship after another runner-up spot and appearance on the podium. Pecco Bagnaia completes the Ducati Triumvirate and buries his demons from a disastrous Saturday sprint by taking 3rd. Pedro Acosta, Marco Bezzecchi, Jack Miller and Joan Mir are amongst the fallers today. And Le Mans has broken the record again with a fantastic attendance of 297,000 fans across the event. I think there were just under 120,000 fans today, and Dorna insists there's no discrepancy this time with the actual official figure. So go on, Dave.
Can I just go on my weekly attendance figure rant? There weren't 291,000 people. They sold the equivalent of 291,000 tickets. Now, 120 was it 121 on Sunday? That's just astonishing. That's genuinely astonishing numbers. 119 is equally astonishing. That's really impressive. But most of those were there for the same 3 days, and it just
All of them were there for the 3 days.
Yeah, pretty much. Yes, yeah, pretty much. And it just really irritates me that that they count these, that they pretend that counting the same people 3 times is the same as having 3 lots of individuals.
But there's 2 sides of it, isn't there? There's the fact that, you have the people here, but then it's a separate day, isn't it? I mean, every 24 hours.
There's 2 sides to it, and one of the sides is wrong, and the other side is right. It's not very difficult. The way that mathematics works is that there are 119,000 individuals turned up on Sunday, and some of those individuals turned up on 3 separate days, and so they were counted. They were counted 3 times, or even 4 times. There's a whole bunch of them counted 4 times. So anyway, I shall shut up now because it's just one of those. Someone mentioned Jeremy Clarkson to me a few days, and I still haven't. My rage is still. It's just still steam out my ears.
Well, whichever way you paint it, it's a large amount of people. And the good thing is that sitting here, and incidentally, if there are any bangs or scrapes or anything going on, and it's because people are exiting the media centre as we record this, then there was a lot of people here for this French Grand Prix for the 2nd year in a row. So on that note, I want to go straight to our grades for this Grand Prix. And to you first, Neil, what was your score out of 10 for this particular event?
It would probably have to be an 8.5, maybe a 9. I mean, I feel like I would just be repeating myself for what I gave Jerez, but massive crowd from Thursday right the way through to Sunday. Largely great weather. We didn't have the rain forecast on Sunday, which we were slightly anticipating and fearing. We had a really great MotoGP race, a pretty interesting Moto2 race, which was a slow burner, but exploded into life towards the end. Great, fantastic Moto3 race, and one pretty super Moto E race yesterday. So overall, I thought it was highly entertaining. And like I said at Jerez, what really more could you have asked for?
Yeah, I mean, above all, it's been 3 fantastic Grand Prix in a row, hasn't it? I mean, what a stellar start to MotoGP this year. Dave, how did you see it from where you were sitting?
Well, I think I got told off last time for giving it 10 out of 10, so I'm going to give this one 12 out of 10 because it was just absolutely spectacular. There was Moto3. The arrival of Pirellis has really improved Moto3. It's really added a huge level of skill rather than just sort of the ability to switch your brain off. And you're sort of seeing that. You're also seeing that the best riders are consistently winning. They're consistently at the front, and it was a really good race. Moto2 was fantastic, especially the last few laps. Moto2, I think, has probably benefited even more from the Pirellis than the MotoGP. Than Moto3. And the MotoGP race was just spectacular, just absolutely fantastic. There was just so much to talk about. It was a great race. No, and of course, the atmosphere, the crowds. I mean, I'm not at Le Mans because I don't really like people, but I cannot deny that the atmosphere is just stellar.
Dave, you should have watched Moto3 last year because what is happening this year is pretty much what happened last year. It's just a bit faster this year.
No, that's completely wrong. Because obviously it can't be true because otherwise I'd be wrong. Yeah, exactly. Look, I've made my mind. Stop confusing me with facts.
I rescind my point.
I'm just highly disturbed that Dave's now a newfound fan of Moto3, Neil. I can't get my head around it. It's just, and after the enthusiastic presence in the press conference, couldn't handle
it.
You
wait till we get to the moments.
Oh, goodness gracious. I have to say, I'm going to, I didn't want to go overboard with the grading this year, but I think Le Mans has pretty much ticked every single box. There was one point in the MotoGP race where I thought we were in for a bit of a snoozer here. It did seem a bit static and formulaic, and when you looked at the monitor and saw there were 17 laps still to go, it was like, oh, right, okay. But then there was the realization, as Jorge Martin himself said, that it was a long old race and it would change, deep into the proceedings. And 5 laps to go, especially, things really heated up. And it was just very watchable, very engaging. At the moment, there's nothing much broken about MotoGP. All this concern over overtaking and whatever else. And, atmosphere, like you said, Dave, you just cannot beat the real sense of occasion that there is here. And every evening there's been some sort of evening activity once the bikes have stopped running. And the grandstands are just packed. I mean, it's something that I think a lot of other events have a deep envy for. And Dave, I think you pointed out, or maybe you sent a message in our group saying that other Grand Prix actually come to Le Mans, or they should do, to study how things are done, because it's not a rocket science. And every year this place just seems to knock the ball out of the park in terms of having the right effect.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things that you see at this GP is that it's become quite mainstream MotoGP. I think 10 years or so ago, back when Dave was coming here and was developing a deep disdain for the place, it was mostly a bunch of old lads who were drinking too much beer and acting a bit garishly on a Saturday night. Whereas from what I could see this weekend, there was a lot of, I saw a couple of families coming into the track earlier. I saw lots of kids coming around. Yeah, there were lots of people who looked like they had drunk way too much standing at the catch fence this morning. But at the same time, I think Fabio Quartararo's success in MotoGP has kind of really put it into the mainstream, and you see all types of fans coming here from all kinds of demographics, and lots of women, lots of younger people as well, lots of kids, and I think that's a pretty cool thing. So I think France is a shining example for MotoGP to look at, because it sort of seems that the people interested in the sport here has kind of gone a bit more in the direction that I imagine Liberty Media will want to take it, generally speaking, in the future.
Agree with that. I think in part, a lot of it is down to Fabio Quartararo because he's a very interesting character. You know, he has a much wider sort of view of things than just racing. You know, he's sort of big into his fashion and he's making his own clothes and all these sort of things. A lot of stuff he's posting on his social media is very sort of more open to the world. You know, much more about fashion, that sort of thing. A little bit to an extent of what Lewis Hamilton has done with F1, and that really opens it up. And I mean, I noticed even from here, just looking at the images, that there were lots and lots of families and lots of kids. And it's the same in Spain. You know, that's why it's so big in Spain. The same in Italy. You go there and it's not just, 50-year-old men. It's not just people like me. It's families with their kids, with the grandma, with little toddlers running around, mum and dad, brothers, sisters, the whole lot. Everyone sitting around with a picnic and really enjoying it. So that is just really, really good for the sport because it ensures the future. It guarantees the future of the sport.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. And the key thing for me, and I'll show my ignorance by not knowing what other events do, but having under 16s free is a big deal. I have two kids, one of which is under 16, one is which just over. And, if you have to spend the upwards of €400 to €500 for four of you to come to a Grand Prix, then you slice that in half and it suddenly becomes 200, then it makes a big difference. And I think, you're both hinting, you're guaranteeing the future of the sport by getting kids hooked. And you know what? There is just a big passion for bikes here. And when I say that, I mean there's no booing, there's no cheering when someone falls off or goes flying through the gravel at 100 mile an hour that you see in some other Grand Prix. And I think that's just something that should be applauded. Onto our moments from the Grand Prix.
Very briefly, sorry, Pecco Bagnaia was booed on the grid before the sprint yesterday, so there's still a little residual bitterness after how the 2022 championship ended. Yeah,
but then also his special grandstand devoted to him was one of the areas packed out, which is just over at turn 1. So there is, that does get offset. But okay, I didn't hear any booing, no, but maybe that's selective hearing. Who knows? Moments. Over to you first, Neil.
Well, I'm going to go to Saturday's sprint race for my moment of the weekend, and that was Marc Marquez's first couple of corners of the sprint, because it was reminiscent of Marc in his Moto2 days when he was doing those ludicrous kind of fightbacks in the early laps, and just his positioning on track was sensational. He got a great launch off the line, was inside a couple of riders going into turn 1, turn 2 right, and then he managed to position himself just right at the Dunlop chicane, going a little around the outside of some people as they were entering turn 3. So he was in the inside of turn 4. I think he went from 13th to 6th through the first chicane, the first corner, and then the first chicane, and then he picked off, I think it was Fabio Di Gianantonio on the run down to La Chapelle just after that. So it was breathtaking, it was sensational, it was a little bit lucky, but it was also that brilliant side of Marc where he just has this amazing positional and spatial awareness and the requisite bravery, of course, to put himself where he exactly needs to be. And I don't think there's really many MotoGP riders that can do that. Maybe Brad Binder, who showed in the Sunday race that he can. But yeah, I think Marc is pretty unique in that way.
My moment of the weekend also involves Marc Marquez, and it was just his move on Bagnaia to take second position there on the last lap. I think in Spanish, he was explaining to our colleagues that, he decided just to go fishing, right at the end of the race to see what he could get. And, to be able to outbrake Bagnaia there. And it was a corner where Pecco had a big sort of crash, earlier in the weekend. There was a point where I thought, is the world champion going to lunge back and try and something on the last couple of turns to regain the position? But he kind of, I think the conservative nature or the championship mode clicked in. But, it was brilliant by Marquez, and, shows again his fast adaptation to the Ducati. So, one of the parts of the season so far. Dave?
Yeah, as I said, I'm going to shock you all by choosing a moment from Moto3. I mean, there was so much to choose from this weekend. It's really hard to pick one out. There was so much going on. But watching David Alonso through turn 1 at during the race was just astonishing. He was able to carry so much speed through there. When he was ahead, he was impossible to pass. When he was able to pass, I think he passed Veyer, I think he passed Holgado. He was just so much better than everyone through there. And to be able to carry that speed through the fastest and scariest corner on the track was just really, really impressive. I mean, what I really liked about the whole Moto3 race was, it was Holgado versus Alonso versus Colin Veyer. They were clearly the three best riders. I mean, David Munoz was doing all right as well, but he just kept on knocking people off, which is not the way you're supposed to race. So, yeah, I mean, it was a really, really good. It was a good race, and it was the best riders really showing what they were worth. And David Alonso's speed through that section was just breathtaking.
I'd just like to point out that our moments of the weekend are actually circled by a shiny orange KTM logo. Big thanks to those proactive people in Austria for supporting the podcast this year. I really hope we get a KTM 990 Duke to test ride very soon. Let's move on to some of our talking points from the Grand Prix, today, as well as the sprint yesterday. Dave, I think one of the biggest questions we have now, it was something that a lot of media sources were talking about over the weekend, and Jorge Martin was, moved to answer it again in the press conference with a sort of resignation that he is tired of the subject. But it is about what Ducati do with their second factory seat. And just from what I hear, I don't think we're going to see anything really decided until after Mugello, for sure. I think, 2 to 3 weeks is going to be too soon for any sort of confirmation about who goes where and who does what. But what's your perspective on the whole? Is it going to be Mark? Is it going to be Jorge? What do you think?
I mean, it was really interesting listening to Jorge Martin because he was saying, basically, I think the decision has already been made, which was a surprise. So. Yeah, I think it's just a really, really difficult decision because of what's possible. Jorge Martin is doing everything. He's doing nothing wrong. He had an almost perfect weekend. The only sort of slight flaw on this weekend was the fact that he was, he didn't get the race lap record. He got the pole record. It's the first rider to ever to lap in a 1:29. It's just astonishing. Marquez came through the field on an old bike, caught up with the rest, and then passed the world champion. And Ea Bastianini was lapping faster than anyone else towards the end of towards the end of the race. It was an embarrassment of riches, really, for Ducati. They were all showing why they deserved it, but on the current form, it's. I mean, why would you not choose Jorge Martin? Because he is so much better. He just seems to be so much better than anyone else on the bike at the moment. You would be choosing Marc Marquez because you would think he's going to be better next year. You would choose an Ea Bastianini because you want to give him a chance. But why would you give him a chance? There are options which are already available and possibly better. So I think it should be Jorge Martin, but I have sort of a sneaking suspicion it might be Marc Marquez because of his potential. You can see how much better he gets every single race. And also, he's just marketing gold. It would be absolutely fantastic to have him in the factory team for Ducati because he would help sell a lot more bikes.
I mean, I think I would contest you saying that Martin is so much better. We did just witness Mark come through to second, finishing marginally behind him after starting from 13th in just his fifth round on the bike, which I think is pretty impressive. You mentioned that he has the potential. I mean, yeah, the potential is definitely there from Mark, and had he not sort of qualified badly like he did in Austin, we could have been talking about a completely different result today. But I do agree with you, Dave, in that Martin is pretty much doing all he can do. The Reth race aside, he's been almost perfect this year, and he's just he was under such intense pressure in that race today. When Pecco hit the front, we've seen so many situations before when he does that in the Sunday that he just gets out sets his rhythm, and no one can touch him. And if someone can get close to him, they can't pass him. But Martin was harrying Pecco, and was pretty clinical in his overtakes generally. He made a couple of mistakes when he was in the lead, and then wasn't quite able to break clear like I thought he was going to at one point. But he also he did pretty well late on. No real mistakes on the final lap, which allowed Pecco to have a look in, and yeah, it was just it was the kind of the full set and a fantastic response to what happened at Jerez, because Jerez must have been really a bit of a knock, not just to him crashing out of the lead, but to see Pecco and Mark that strong at Jerez. I think that was sort of that doubled his disappointment. So yeah, it's impressive. It does seem as though, I mean, what we're hearing in the paddock, it does seem that the decision is going towards the Marquez camp. But yeah, I think Jorge would have really good reason to feel very, very slighted if that happened.
Yes, absolutely. I think the thing that has impressed me most about Jorge Martin is the fact that he is. I mean, he was really good at the end of last year, but he's even better this year. Like he has worked on his weaknesses, improved his weaknesses. He's much more consistent. He doesn't make so many mistakes, and he absolutely has earned it. And I think the question that Ducati have to ask is, yes, we can have Marc Marquez, who is an absolute legend, and he'll be on the bike for 3 years. Martin is much younger, can be on the bike for 4, 5, 6 years, and if they don't put him in the factory team, he's going somewhere else. He's not going to sit on a factory bike in Pramac. He's going to go off and ride for Aprilia or ride for Yamaha or ride for someone else. So if they don't choose Martin, they lose him. The question is, can they afford to lose him? That then raises the question: if they don't sign Mark, do they lose Mark? And if they, can they afford to have Mark? Because the good thing about signing Mark is, he's on your bike and he's not beating you on someone else's bike. If he goes to KTM, then you could be in a whole sort of world of pain.
The thing is, if you want the best rider, who is the best rider? One of the best riders in the history of the sport, or the guy who's just like nailed every session there is, at the French Grand Prix? And I don't think Martin can feel that slighted, Neil, if he's outbid or he loses a place to Marc Marquez of all people.
Yeah, but I mean, he finished ahead of Marc Marquez in the championship last year by quite some distance. Obviously, there are circumstances which led to that, but he also is ahead of Marc Marquez by 2 places in this year's World Championship as well. He's already won 2 races. Marc is yet to win a race. He's won how many sprints so far? 2, I think. 3.
3.
Yeah, 3.
On a GP24.
On a GP24, okay, but there's not a great deal of difference between the 24 and the 23. So yeah, I think there's plenty of reasons. He also, as we've spoken about before, still has this feeling of injustice burning within him, because he feels he should be on the red bike already. If not last year, then certainly this year, and came so close to being on the red bike this year, courtesy of winning last year's championship. So yeah, I can imagine that there is a great deal of frustration. Also, there was an interesting thing over the weekend. Dave just said, if Martin doesn't get the factory seat, then he'll leave. He did open up the possibility of remaining in a satellite team this weekend. It was the first time that he kind of said that. We always assumed that he was destined for a factory team no matter what, whether it was Ducati or Aprilia or Honda or wherever. But he did, for the first time this weekend, mention that maybe staying put would be an option, and that was the first time I'd heard him say this. So it led me to believe that he's at least considering it.
I would love to. I mean, one of the next race about in Barcelona, one of the questions I want to ask is, how do you liking being a satellite team? Because we've talked about this before. It is so much lower stress. There's so much more. There's so much less media. There's so much more freedom. You're allowed to do much more sort of what you want to do, and that must be quite liberating for him. And if he can stay where he is, get a GP24 or a GP25, I think that would be a really, really attractive prospect. Of course, we don't know what Pramac is doing. Is Pramac going to go to Yamaha or not? But I think the most the thing that points to Jorge Martin leaving to me is that is pride. The one thing that riders always have is pride. The reason that riders leave a particular team or a particular family is because they don't, factory, is because they don't feel like they are being given the respect that they feel they deserve. Look at Valentino Rossi leaving Honda. Look at him leaving Yamaha. Look at Lorenzo leaving Yamaha and leaving Ducati again. There's so many of the examples. I think Eddie Lawson was the same. There's so many examples of people feeling disrespected and leaving, and it feels really strongly that Jorge Martin is not feeling he's getting the respect that he deserves. And he's been quite interesting this weekend, talking about, like having doubts, like he doubted he'd be okay, and he was doubted his speed during the weekend, and that sort of self-doubt is one of the things why he wants to have that recognition from a factory team to be able to sort of build on.
There are other sort of intricacies involved in this deal making as well. I mean, from a marketing point of view, you surely want Marc Marquez compared to Jorge Martin. From a team harmony point of view, I don't know if there's much difference between putting Marc in the lion's den or, plugging Martin in, because how is that whole dynamic going to work? This is the sort of thing that sort of managers and crew chiefs and whatever else inside the Ducati Lenovo setup will be looking at. And don't forget, there's Marquez's sense of loyalty. I mean, he's used Alpine Stars, he's used Shoei all of his career, and he's been a Red Bull athlete. If he goes to the Ducati factory team, he's going to have to switch to Monster. I'm sure Monster would be, delighted to have a rider or a personality of Marquez's clout inside their family, and the checkbook will probably fall open at the right page. But would Marc want to go for that? There are advantages, as we've said, and Dave, you pointed out many times, to being in a satellite setup. And let's just talk about his performance for a moment. I mean, Neil, coming to you, because you cited his remarkable comeback on Saturday. I mean, Marc is older than Jorge Martin, but you wouldn't necessarily see it on the track. I mean, he's as fit as you can be. And, he really still has the goods. I mean, this was only his 5th Grand Prix on the bike, whereas Martin, like several other riders, Bagnaia being one of them, only knows one particular type of motorcycle in the Premier class.
Yeah, exactly. It was fantastic. And just briefly to come to what you were previously saying there, Ad, I mean, Marc has been with Red Bull since, his 125cc days? I mean, Red Bull have been a constant in his career. So leaving them to join a rival drinks manufacturer, energy drinks manufacturer, would be a massive, massive deal. And, it's not obviously going to be the first thing that he considers, but I think it's going to be a pretty important thing that he would consider in his decision-making process. Speaking about his performance this weekend, just such a pretty remarkable turnaround from Friday, where he was loose, he was a bit wild, he really wasn't consistent. You said you watched somewhat in track ad on Friday afternoon and noticed just how he wasn't hitting the same line at all, how the front was moving around. It looked a bit crazy. Didn't look as though he was going to be able to string a couple of laps together, never mind a sprint race distance or a full race distance. But he seemed to sort it out on Saturday morning. Didn't get his qualifying right, but just his progress in the race was remarkable. And I really thought in today's race, in Sunday's race, that once he got through to third, after battling with Dijan and Antonio, that was it, because I think Pecco and Jorge Martin were 2.5 seconds up the road, somewhere around there. And how he just tore into their advantage was quite astonishing. I mean, to do it at Sarthe, where he had been showing that kind of speed all weekend at Sarthe, was one thing, but to do it here, where we hadn't really seen that kind of advantage from Marc in the practice sessions, I thought was really, really impressive. And obviously he was helped a little bit by Martin and Bagnaia fighting up the front, but still it was really impressive, and he seemed to just be a little out of gas by the time he got to the victory fight, but still had enough in his locker to launch that amazing pass on Bagnaia in the final lap. So ridiculously strong performance. And after being beaten by Bagnaia, it was so important for him to try and respond in some way this week. And I do think it's a kind of performance that will give Bagnaia and Martin some real food for thought, because even though Martin won, the way that Marc basically closed in on him in the second half of the race was quite something.
Dave, what's your take on the championship picture so far? Because Martin has a hefty lead, but then there's a big kind of wodge of riders very close together in terms of the points. I mean, Bagnaia also really saved himself, didn't he, by getting on the podium today?
He did say, I mean, like, he needed to do that. He really needed to, to close the gap, because he did have a miserable time in the sprint yesterday. He lost a lot of ground. And Jorge Martin, what's his lead is now 38 points. That's a lot. It's a lot of points ahead of Bagnaia, Marquez, Bastianini. There's 2 points between them. Vinales, Acosta, Binder, all there. I mean, like Acosta had a crash. He was quite irritated because he said, the bike felt really good. The bike was there to be, in English he said, for something really special. And I think in Spanish he was saying basically, the bike was capable of winning. But he got stuck between Digia and Aleix Espargaro, and had to. He said basically he lost the front trying not to hit them. But I think it's. I mean, it's still way too early. There's still, an awful lot of points left. I think 555 points. That's a lot. Marquez is clearly getting better and better and better. But on weekends like this, if Jorge Martin keeps on doing this, catching him is going to be extremely difficult. Pecco Bagnaia needs to become a lot more consistent. Again, what happened in the sprint race, it seems to have been a technical problem. It looks like an electronics issue, or it certainly sounded like an electronics issue when I was watching the onboard stuff. But we'll talk about that in the weekend. But you can't make those sort of mistakes. He has to have a much stronger, much more consistent focus during the week. He has to be stronger on Saturday and Sunday. And what Martin has done this year is improve on Sundays. He's much better on Sundays than he was last year.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you look at the championship, Bagnaia has scored just 2 points from the last 3 sprints, which is pretty remarkable. Whereas Martin has scored 31 points in the 3 sprints since Austin. So little by little, he's just managing to build up that advantage. And even if he's not performing to his maximum on a Sunday, the fact that he is regularly getting the biggest points all on offer on a Saturday is really, adding to that championship buffer.
Guys, after decent weather on Friday and Saturday and Thursday, of course, there was a degree of uncertainty this morning. It was still warm, but cloudy, and it looked like we might be in for some showers. Riders were going through warm up and they were practicing bike swaps for flag to flag. In the end, the Grand Prix sort of stayed dry. But one other subject that seemed to come up through the rider debriefs throughout the 3 days was just a little bit of frustration or some possible inconsistency with the tires again. Riders suffering a lot with the front, raised pressures, locking in particular. I mean, Maverick Vinales, for example, one of the riders who was the most likely to threaten Ducati across the weekend, had front locking on Saturday, and he had a higher rear temperature. I think it was today as well. No, the locking was on Friday. Sorry, he had the rear problem yesterday, and then it was still bothering him today. And ironically, at the Michelin Grand Prix de France, it just seemed like there was another occasion when tyres were coming up in a lot of comments and were on the thoughts of the riders and the teams. I just wondered how you saw it.
Le Mans, I think, in particular, is one of the most difficult circuits because Michelin has to send out the list of tyres which they're going to use at each race at the beginning of the season, before the season has even started. That means they have to guess the weather. And as you've both been saying, the weather's been absolutely fantastic. We saw track temperatures of 39 degrees on Saturday, which is well up at the top range of what you might expect at Le Mans. Normally you also need to have tyres which will work if it's only sort of 9 or 10 degrees, which is quite it's quite common for this time of year in Le Mans. So it's really difficult. The other thing that you saw was the change in track temperature as well. I mean, the track temperature on Saturday was 39 degrees. It started at 30 degrees during the race, and it dropped to about 27 actually during the race. So that means that it makes it much more difficult to actually set your tire pressures and your temperature much better. I think a lot of people got that wrong during the weekend, especially during the race, because it changed so much from the morning. You're trying something in the morning, you've got your setup working, and then you've got to sort of, you've got to guess what the track temperature is going to be and what effect that is, because there were a fair number of people complaining about rear tire temperatures, which is really sort of which is quite odd. The front we're much more used to, but the rear, the people complaining about rear track temperatures, tire temperatures, that's usually much more to do with the track and conditions and that sort of thing.
Well, let's move on to our winners and losers section. And basically, if you pick up any products from the flyracing.com website, then you're definitely a winner. We're talking about fantastic quality, decent prices, and there's a whole range of apparel, whether you're riding on the street or also the dirt bike helmet, the Formula S features some remarkable advanced technology such as Rheon pads, and of course that special sensor that alerts anybody who've had an accident, if you're riding by yourself, you're in the outback, you're in the woods, whatever. So check out flyracing.com, and in particular the Formula S helmet. Winners and losers, as I said, I'm going to move on to my choice first, which is kind of the same party for both winners and losers, because I thought the footage of the American racing team when Joe Roberts made that lunge into podium contention in the last corner was amazing. I mean, the crew was celebrating like mad, and then it just turned to utter dejection in the space of a couple of seconds as they realized that Joe was going to be beaten to the line, lost the podium spot by a slither of a second. It was sporting drama just summed up in a couple of seconds of TV footage. It was brilliant. But on the same note, I would like to nominate, on a more serious consideration, the VR46 team, because it was a dire Grand Prix for Marco Bezzecchi. A Grand Prix that he won last year, the 1000th Grand Prix in history, and so he was the loser, and the winner was Digia, because I think he's having a pretty solid season as part of another new team once more on a year-old bike. I mean, I know we pointed out that there's not that much difference between the GP23 and GP24, but Digia's been acquitting himself pretty well against a teammate that many thought would pretty much blow him into the weeds. So there are my picks. Dave, your winners and losers?
Well, I'm going to give my winner as Jorge Martin, because I don't feel he gets the love that he deserves. He is doing something exceptional. This was an exceptional weekend. I mean, everyone sort of, acknowledges that, he's doing really great. He's doing fantastic. And then sort of moves on to talk about other people. So you feel slightly sorry for him. So I've decided to lend him the high honor of awarding him my winner of the week, which I'm sure he'll be delighted about if he ever hears about it. But yeah, I mean, honestly, he was just fantastic. He did everything right. The fact that he was sitting behind Pecco Bagnaia during the race, he chose to sit behind Bagnaia during the race. He chose, knowing that, okay, right, there's a few places where I think I can pass and try to leave. He made a couple of mistakes, but he rectified them. So I don't think he did anything wrong. And I think, it needs to be said, Jorge Martin is having an exceptional season, but there's so many other exciting things happen. All these shiny baubles going on that he's being a little bit ignored. And my loser is the rider who I would say probably has lost out on the second factory seat, which is Enea Bastianini. Again, Bastianini had a really strong race. I mean, his pace at the end of the race was absolutely fantastic. But, he made a mistake. He had his qualifying didn't go the way that it should. He got into a slight altercation with Aleix Espargaro, which saw him have to do a long lap penalty because he ran off track. And that, I think, is it was sort of it showed his potential in how fast he could be, and especially in the second half of the race. But it also showed his weakness in, he wasn't in a position to be on a podium. He should have been on the podium this week. And I think this was just a reminder for us, but also for Ducati, why Jorge Martin and Marc Marquez are better choices. So I think he's my loser, because I think this is the weekend where he lost the Factory Ducati seat.
Neil, your winner and your wretch.
Well, I've gone for slightly left field picks, as Dave plumped for the very, very obvious. I'm going to go with Mr. Fabio Quartararo for my winner, and I know that sounds a bit bizarre. Fabio was a crasher out of his home Grand Prix and scored no points on the Sunday, but I do think his ride on Sunday was pretty remarkable. I don't think that the Yamaha had any right to be up there in 6th place, I think it was, when he crashed out. When you consider the performance of Alex Rins, who was done in 15th, 30 seconds off the victor at the checkered flag. Fabio was up there. He said he was delighted in some respects because he was fighting amongst names that he is accustomed to fighting with, or at least he was used to fighting with in years gone by. It's been a torrid time for him recently, and it must have been so difficult coming to this race with such a vocal and vociferous home support, to know that basically any chance of a good podium challenge was basically out of the window from the start. But he said they made a massive change to the bike from Saturday night through to Sunday. He said it gave him just a little change in feeling. He was expecting a big difference to the change, but it said it was just a little bit of a help when he was braking and pitching into the turn. And he was absolutely on the limit, the ragged edge, when he was fighting with Aleix Espargaro, and that eventually told when he crashed out, I think, down at turn 9. But still, a brilliant performance, and I think it was a timely reminder that Fabio still is one of the top names, because there's not really many riders in the world that could have got that kind of tune out of the Yamaha, I feel, around here, in front of such a sizable home support. And I'm going to have to plump, unfortunately, for Brad Binder for my loser, because there was a lot to admire in his Sunday performance. Brad was starting last, 22nd on the grid. He came through to 8th. He had a pretty good launch, pretty good first couple of corners. And it was definitely the best showing that he's had this weekend. But I think, just generally speaking, for a rider that we thought was going to be a championship contender coming into the season, the last 3 weekends have just fallen way below what we were thinking. I think what Brad was thinking, I think what KTM was thinking. And when Pedro Acosta is saying something like, the bike was probably capable to fight for victory today, Brad coming away with 8th place. Yes, it was a great recovery ride, but it's another weekend where it doesn't come close to fulfilling his potential because of one thing or another. And that seems to have been happening to both Miller and Binder in the factory team just way too often. Certainly way too often if they have designs on fighting for the championship. Binder crashed 3 times on Friday, had a nightmare in qualified down in 22nd, and just was having real problems stopping the bike, turning the bike. He said he made big steps forward there, but you can't be leaving everything so late into the weekend. And Binder finds himself, after a really strong start to the year in Qatar, Binder already finds himself 62 points off the pace in the championship. I don't want to say that that's too big a gap to get back with such a massive amount of the championship to go, but I just we're early in the year, but I just don't see it at the moment. So I think it's a tough time for both of the factory KTM riders, but Binder, I think, is fallen below, certainly quite a bit he's falling quite a bit below where we expected him to be.
Excellent shout on Quartararo, by the way, because that was just astonishing performance. He was riding so far above himself. It was really, really pleased to see. And about Brad Binder's start, I recommend people go and watch, if you've got the MotoGP.com subscription, watch Brad Binder start from the onboard camera, because it's proper PlayStation stuff. He's slicing through everywhere. It also shows you just how good the starting setup for the KTMs are. It's really, really quick. You can also enjoy Mark if you've got that. You can also enjoy Marc Marquez's on board during the sprint as well, which is just really, really fun.
I think Brad was telling us that he believes the KTM starting prowess is worth a row on the grid. I mean, that was what he was telling us on the debrief, and he's right. I mean, if you watch both him and Jack Miller, then those RC16s are electric. It's fantastic. I mean, it's like instant torque and maximum efficiency. But just a quick note, and Neil, you mentioned Pedro Acosta and Dave. I think you said in one of our group chats over the weekend, or maybe on email, I can't remember, that he's a bit of a quote machine. And he was that way again. And it turns out that Acosta had actually made a change to the setup of the bike after the sprint race yesterday. And, he was really optimistic of a good result today. So it was a real shame that kind of lunge down into Garagevert, I think, ended up, I mean, what a close call as well between Alessio Spargaro and Digia. That was scary stuff. But, we could have seen something special from Acosta today, but that was more like the kind of rookie that we were expecting in 2024. And afterwards he said, I was feeling great, but another non-result in Le Mans is almost becoming a tradition. And then sort of like laughed, and you just have to think, you got to love the kid. His perspective on life and racing is very refreshing at the moment. So yes, fantastic stuff. In the Paddock Pass podcast this week, we'll be hearing and learning actually from some clever people in the MotoGP paddock about the technical rules for 2027. And we'll also answer your questions about Le Mans. Patreons talk to us through the Discord chat channel. And listeners get closer to the community by signing up through the Patreon platform. Thanks for listening, and salut from the Circuit de la Sarthe for another year.